Hi, in this video we're going to learn about the main files and directories of the NodeGame platform. You see here I have it open already. It's the main folder of NodeGame. I'm running the development version and you might know it because I have the -dev. If you have that -dev at the end of your installation folder, you also own the development version. There is more file that you need to know of here, so we're going to look just at the most important ones. Let's start with the games folder. In here, you find all the games that are currently installed in NodeGame. You install a game simply by copying it in this folder. You see that some games are links and they point back to the games available folder. This is sometimes useful to keep the games in the games available folder and just add links whenever you need in here. If you look inside one game, the Ultimatum game, which is available in every installation of NodeGame, there is more files and more folder. Let's just look at the most important ones. Starting with the game folder. The game folder contains one extra folder called client types and 3 files. The game stages file contains the names of the stages that you're going to run. It defines the sequence of all the stages and steps which compose your game. So for example, in the Ultimatum game, it starts with the select language stage. There are the instructions, the quiz, the mood stage, and then there is a repeat statement which says that this stage called Ultimatum is going to repeat a certain number of times. We don't know how many in here. It's the same value that comes from the settings. And it proceeds again with the questionnaire and with an end game stage. We know from this statement here that the Ultimatum stage is composed by 2 steps, the bidder and the responder steps. When we're going to start the game, it's going to exactly going through all these stages here. We haven't seen how the actual stages and steps are implemented, we just saw the sequence. They're implemented in the client types. You see there are different ones depending on who is playing actually. It could be a real human player, it could be a bot, it could be an autoplay, or it could be the logic. The logic is actually the one file which is orchestrating the whole game in the background. Some of this file runs on the server, like bot and logic. Some other ones, like player and autoplay, will run in the browser. We will see about the actual implementation of the game in another video. Let's have a look at another important file, which is the wait room. You see there's a lot of comments here, with each one explaining in details how a given setting works. This is the first one called execution mode, and you decide how you're going to start the next game. The default setting is wait for n players, so you're going to wait for a certain number of players to connect. So it says pool size equal 2 and group size equal 2. There are more settings below. We are not going to see them now. We're going to just try out what it means to change these parameters. I'm going now to open a terminal, it is going to be git bash if you're in Windows, it's going to be just a terminal window if you are Mac OS X or in Linux. So here is my main installation of NodeGame. You can start the game with the node launcher command. Remember that the tab key autocompletes the name. Here it is. I have a few warnings. You can ignore the warnings and have an error of a game that cannot load, but I have just many games in this and some are just developing. Let's have a look at the game, Ultimatum. So you saw briefly there was a requirement checking here. I just hit refresh so you can see that again. In that brief step, the engine of NodeGame checked the browser requirements for some standard compatibility checks. And now we passed them, and now we are in the waiting room. We chose the wait for n players mode, and we are now waiting for n players to connect, where n is equal to 2. Pool size and group size both are equal to 2. If I click play, it's gonna play with a bot using one of the following treatments. Let's try it. Here it is. It's playing the select language step, which, as you can see, was the first one over here. I select language English and press done. The game continues, showing the instructions. And you can see again that the instructions what follows. I'm not gonna play it now. I'm just gonna show you what happens if I change the value. So I'm gonna stop the server, pressing Ctrl C. Server stopped. And now I'm gonna change this value. I'm going to change the pool size, but I'm not going to change the group size. I'm going to set this to 4. I'm going to restart the server. Again, Node Launcher. You see now we are waiting for 4 players to connect. It means that we are now waiting for other 3 players to connect. By clicking play, the system is going to connect 3 bots at the same time. As you can see from the monitor interface, in the ultimatum channel, there are 2 game rooms available, room 29 and room 30. I was placed as a human player in room 30. While the game is running, you can see here we are now in the stage 2.1-1, which means stage 2, step 1, round 1. So if you look at the room 29, you see here that there are 2 bots connected, which already finished basically playing the game. They're pretty fast. It's the human player which is lagging behind. Let's see if we can speed it up by pressing done. Oh, this is the quiz stage. Now we are in the 3rd stage. And the 3rd stage is indeed the quiz stage. So why do we have 2 rooms created and each room contains 2 players? That's entirely coming from the settings of the waiting room. Pool size is equal to 4, is waiting for 4 players to connect before creating as many games as needed of group size equal 2. So in this case it created 2 games with 2 players each. If we would have set this number equal to 4, you would have started a game with 4 players. So it's important that when you run an experiment online, you often have a larger pool size. That is because at the beginning of an experiment online, if you don't know the subject pool, where you just, for example, recruiting people from a labor market, an online labor market such as Amazon Mechanical Turk, on a first come first served basis, those people who are faster in coming to your experiment, they will probably have specific characteristics, and you want to randomize the assignment of the fastest players between the 2 treatments. Now we're going to modify the sequence. So we're going to change the order of the steps. We're going to start with instructions and then the select language, which doesn't make much sense, but we just to illustrate the point of modifying the sequence. So now I set pool size and group size back to 2. I have restarted the server, and I'm gonna restart the. I'm gonna refresh the browser. If I hit play now, first there is instructions. You click done, then there is select language. So now we learn how to modify the order of the steps and stages in the sequence. The last thing I wanted to show you is a file which is in the game folder, is the game settings file. This file contains settings which are game specific, as well as some settings which are for the NodeGame, which is also read by the NodeGame engine. I want to show you, for example, that there is a treatments object which contains two nested objects. One is called standard, which is the name of the treatment, and the one is called double P, which is also the name of another treatment, which is a shorthand for peer pressure. These treatments vary two things: the waiting time in case of a disconnection and the instruction page. We'll see how these things comes together later on, but I want to show you that there is a direct connection between what is in here and what is shown by the waiting room. Here in this, under the select treatment button, you can see there is the standard treatment and the double P treatment, which exactly contains this variable here. A bit more above, there is the timer object which contains the length of the timers in milliseconds for each of the stages. For example, if I change this to 10,000 milliseconds, which is equal to 10 seconds, and then restart the server, we're going to see that the instruction stage now just lasts for 10 seconds. You see, the time left here is greatly reduced to 10 seconds. You probably don't want to have such a short time for your instructions. When you develop a game, you may work on the last stage, for example the questionnaire, and you may move it to the top so that this stage comes first, but this is not always possible. So you might also want to do something different, so you can skip specific stages or steps. For example, to skip something that comes before the questionnaire, you simply had this stage or skip statement. In this case, we skipped all the stages before the questionnaire, and we can restart the server. We hit play. Here we go, we are directly into the final questionnaire without having played anything. Here we went back to the directory of the ultimatum game. I want to just give you a brief introduction to all the other directories which are in there. The name kind of suggests what they are for. The auth folder is for the authorization rules. There is, for example, the auth settings, which says that they are now disabled. So enabled equal false. So for this reason we can just join the game. So now if you look at the channel, there are 3 files which you usually don't modify very often. The secret and the credential are generated usually at the moment when you create the game. You don't have to worry about the secret, and the credential contain your username and password for accessing the monitor if authorization is enabled. In my case, it's just admin, which you shouldn't use, and you shouldn't even show this file to other people. The data folder is very important because it contains the files saved by the game. For example, if we check one room among the many which I've played, you can find you can find a similar structure like this. So there is a bonus file, an email and feedback file which are generated by the end screen widget. There is a memory all.json which contains all the items in JSON format, a times files, an ultimatum.csv file. So the actual files you have in here depends on the information that you decide to save. But let's have a look at what's in there by default. For example, in the ultimatum.csv. So you can see the session name, the room name is saved, the player who did the decision, the round in which it was taken, the role, if it was a bidder, was the partner. You see this actually match, if it was an offer, if it was accepted or rejected. And in the times files, for example, you can see how long it took for each player to go through one of the stages. Here, this is the time from the beginning of a step, for example, from showing the instruction until you click down and the game proceeds to the next stage. Okay, let's go back to the main folder. Another couple of folders we can look is the public, which contains all the public files which are accessible through the internet. So you shouldn't save anything which is important or confidential in here. So the Ultimatum game doesn't actually use this folder for serving the files like the HTML files, the CSS files, or the JS files, unless for very specific pages, because it actually implements views. Views are an advanced topic that we don't cover here, and most of the time you actually use the simple HTML files. The last folders which I kept showing is the requirements. So these are the files. This is the file that tells what kind of tests people browser is exposed to before joining this experiment. So you see it's enabled. I'm going to disable it now so that we don't want to test your own browser over and over again. For example, you can see the maximum execution time for all the tests is quite high, so normally the people pass it. There's a speed test which measures both the connection speed of the client as well as how much a server is overloaded. So if you take a long time to send a message back and forth, it could be that either the speed of the connection of the client is very low or that the server is overloaded. This is not enabled right now, but you can just uncomment it and enable it. We require cookie support, and you can also specify minimum size of the window, certain options if you want to have a browser which is mobile or just desktop, specific browsers, and so on. Now I disable it. Restarting the server, you will see that we don't see that screen with the requirements check anymore. You see, we just went through the waiting room. One more thing you might want to know that you can even skip the waiting room. So let's go back to the waiting room.settings file, and let's look for the onConnect statement. Here it is. So I already inserted here the code that allows me to just autoplay immediately with bots. So the onConnect is a function that is executed as soon as the player connects. In this case, it checks that the player is not a bot, and if it's not a bot, it just starts a new game with as many bots as needed to actually play the game. So by adding these lines here, we can test our game without having a delay at the beginning with the requirements or with the waiting room. Let's see. Wow, it just went through and we're already in the final questionnaire. Technical failure. It was weird, yeah. And thank you for participating. Goodbye.